So this is part of what we're talking about in terms of becoming more quantum level attuned.
In 1992, Professor Walter Schempp discovered how atoms communicate with each other over any distance through the field. He discovered in the atom, when electrons are in a higher frequency shell or orbit around the proton, the atom emits light waves carrying intelligent information, similar to the way when we are talking and communicating, our brain waves go into a higher frequency wave state. He found when the electron jumps to a lower frequency wavelength, the atom receives photons carrying intelligent information, as if they are listening, just as when we are listening, we go into a lower frequency brainwave state. The timing of when electrons jump shells to higher or lower frequency orbits is completely random and cannot be quantified by any mathematical predictable formula likened to random human behavior. There are several other behaviors in quantum mechanics that remind physicists of human random consciousness, as opposed to models demonstrating repeatable and reliable mathematical timing, such as the sun rising every day at the precise expected time, and the 9 planets' orbits around it. In the quantum universe, finding precise timing and repetition of events is very difficult in certain functions of the atom and its components. Niels Bohr and Heisenberg presented to Einstein at the 1927 Fifth Solvay Conference on Quantum Mechanics that the minds of the researchers were affecting the angular momentum of the electron's spin around the proton. This was because different data came in when different researchers were conducting the experiments. The data was always random and could not be quantified in a repeatable and reliable mathematical formula. As far as the laws of mathematics refer to reality, they are not certain. And as far as they are certain, they do not refer to reality. Albert Einstein. In Richard Feynman's book, The Strange Theory of Light and Matter, he tried to quantify the behavior of the timing of which light particles, photons, emanating from a light source would reflect through several layers of glass and bounce back to detectors. Light particles do 3 things when they strike a glass target. 1, they either travel through the glass sheet, or 2, they react and scatter inside the glass sheet, or 3, they bounce back to give us a picture of the sheet of glass. Feynman shined his light source through several sheets of glass, allowing light particles to choose to bounce off of or react to the surface of various layers of glass. He wanted to see if there was a quantifiable formula for which photons would bounce back and which ones would travel through the glass or penetrate deeper and bounce off another sheet of glass, or scatter and react inside of it, or deeper yet, travel through all the sheets of glass. Regardless of the color of light and various other parameters, there was no way to quantify the strange behavior of light and matter. The light particles, photons, always behaved randomly as to what they would choose to do, just as in human consciousness. Could human intention be so powerful that it could tell particles of light, photons, to penetrate through several layers of glass and even solid barriers? PhD psychologist Stanislav Ojak has demonstrated his power of intention over the film plane of a camera. His intention is so powerful, he found he can cause a photograph to appear while the lens cap on the camera is blocking the lens and the film plane from receiving light. He has done this hundreds of times. He has also been able to take pictures with film and cause invisible spiritual phenomena to appear. His film and photographs were analyzed by Kodak Film Laboratories to be authentic and not caused by double exposures or trick photography.
Several abnormalities that began to occur in the photographs. People became transparent or they disappeared, light aberrations, and then entities which appear to be human-like in some form, but not as we would say it was definitely humanoid. And these aberrations went on. So over a period of about 4 years, it's 74 to, it's longer than that, 74 to 1981, accumulated over 5,000 photographs with a 22% anomalous factor in regards to that.
As Stanislav O. Jack took mystical photographs of the 1972 Seals and Crofts concert, a large luminous face appears overlooking the band on stage with Cher. Then what appeared to be a band of divine beings of white, pointing and perhaps even dancing to their music, gazed into our world without us ever even knowing it. Could beings of white and even angels have listened to the spiritual music of Seals, Croft, and Cher? Could such beings have even inspired their music to be born?
He took pictures with the lens cap on the camera, so that the radiations that eventually were registered on the film went right through the lens cap, and the lens cap will block electromagnetic radiations. So it definitely was different radiations than electromagnetism, and that's why I've called these things subtle energies. Doesn't mean they're weak. It means they're subtle in the sense that they're very different from the energies associated with the four fundamental forces that we know from orthodox science.
Dr. Claude Swanson's synchronized universe model may help explain how we can see into the invisible dimensions of the universe and explain visions and apparitions, and how we can interact with those dimensions, but more importantly, to prove that they are part of our reality.
I developed what I call the synchronized universe model as a way of trying to expand current physics to account for a lot of these psychic phenomena, paranormal phenomena. Besides the types of things we've been talking about, which involve communication psychically and affecting things at a distance, you also have other abilities that the yogis have demonstrated, that certain adepts in China, the Qigong masters, have demonstrated, things like walking through walls, levitation, teleportation, things that in the West we laugh at and we call them science fiction, and yet there are people who have demonstrated reliable abilities to produce these effects. So our science needs to be able to account for how this is possible, and the synchronized universe model says basically that matter is not what we thought it was. They're not like little billiard balls or even little quantum points moving around, that when we say there's a particle at some place, it's a solid matter, what that really involves is an energy exchange between that charge or that particle and all the other particles in the universe. That things are moving very rapidly on a very small scale. This is a scale smaller than the size of the electron, down to more like the Planck scale, which is the basic smallest scale that physics tries to describe. At that scale, there's a synchronization that has to happen, that particles only see each other when their velocities are lined up with each other. In other words, at a very small scale, all the particles are moving very rapidly at the speed of light. So in this system, at a very small scale, and this is part of what we have special relativity, part of our current physics, at very high speeds, a particle only can kind of look in the direction that it's traveling. So if it emits a photon, it has to be in the direction that it's traveling at that instant. Off in the distance would be some other particle. If they're going to interact mutually back and forth, that particle also has to have a velocity lined up with the first one. So the primary interactions at this very small scale would involve particles with velocities that are aligned at that moment of interaction. A moment later, their velocities have changed because they received an impulse from one another. And what this leads to is the only stable solution of this system is when the particles end up being synchronized with each other. The ones that interact consistently on the average over time are the ones that take on little orbits at very small scale, down to Planck level, which are synchronized. You could have many, many other systems of particles that have some other synchronization, either a different frequency of oscillation or a different phase, so they're in some other part of their orbit, so they're looking in a different direction. Those particles would not, on the average, see the first set of particles.